All right, I'm gonna be watching the screen to make sure that we start up because I know there's a bit of a lag.
Right on. I see a live thing right about there.
Yep. There we go.
I just tweeted this out.
Yes, awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the first podcast panel. My name is Lisette Alvarez. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. You can mix it up. I am going to be the moderator for this particular panel about the podcasting community and opening the door. So I'm going to keep an eye on the live chat. So if you have questions or comments that you want to send to us, I'm going to try to make sure I keep track of it so that your voices can also be heard while we do this. All right, so I'm going to introduce our panelists for this lovely morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. First up, we have Eli Barraza. Can you say hi, Eli?
Hi.
She is she uses she, her pronouns. She is the creator of The Far Meridian, as well as the staff writer on multiple completed shows, on the completed show Ars Paradoxica. And I'm sure there's going to be more shows out, and I'm really excited for that. All right. Next, we have Chad Ellis. Can you say hi, Chad?
Hello.
Chad uses he, his, him pronouns, and he is the creator of Station Blue. Now we have Michelle Nickolaisen. Say hi.
Hi.
They use they, them pronouns, and they are the creator of Unplaced and the creator and DM for Serendipity City. Now we have, finally, Anthony Olivieri. Say hi.
Hi.
He's the creator, he uses he, him, his pronouns, and he is the creator of 2298, Magic Kingdom, and the upcoming Limbo. So to introduce myself a little bit, I am the creator of Kalila Stormfire's Economical Magic Services. I am also the voice actor on Magic Kingdom, and I am currently creating an industry podcast for my company that I'm a digital strategist at. So welcome. Thank you so much for all of you for coming on. I'm excited to get started. One of the things I want to do first is lay some ground rules. So just so everybody out there knows, we are trying to be as community-oriented as possible. So this is going to be a rotating panel and a rotating moderator. I'm not going to be your only moderator. Actually, Chad is going to be the moderator for the next one. I'll let him talk about it a little bit later when we get close to wrapping up. And we're trying to make sure that all the panelists are also rotating out, and we're seeing different faces, different voices to really represent the community, because there are plenty of resources out there that are created and sustained by specific hosts or specific people, and we want you to have those types of resources. This panel is really meant to open the door to the community, is really to be a community effort. So I really thank everybody both listening and watching, as well as the people on this panel and some of the other people out there who have been supporting and like getting the word out and helping with. We are going to try to make a website so that different podcasting resources can be curated, links to blog posts and all that. So we can really be a kind of a central hub for people to get information. All right. So now that you kind of figure out what we're doing here, I'm going to lay some ground rules of how this discussion is going to go. So the first one is own your experience. Your experience is valuable and it's not universal. Use I statements and don't deny other people's experiences. Number 2 is examples are great, but please do not name shame. Keep difficult conversations about your experiences of patterns of behavior, not specific people. Number 3, please give other people equal time to speak, but also consider if you are repressing your own opinions. It is my job as a moderator to enforce this rule to both open the conversation to people who are listening more than speaking, and vice versa. Number 4 is to practice active listening. If you have a comment while someone is speaking, instead of dwelling on how you might respond, a lot of us do this when we're in like really interesting conversations, write down your thoughts or type down your thoughts, whatever works best for you. Take a deep breath, exhale, and then continue to pay attention to the person who's speaking without waiting for them to finish. And finally, number 5, please defer to me if I request a change in direction of the conversation. I'm going to try to keep this as smooth as possible. I know a number of these people, and I've engaged with them on the panel a number of times offline. They're great people, and I definitely expect them to be on their best behavior while doing this. I will say you are allowed to swear. So sorry, kids, parents, whoever's listening. I'm going to let you guys swear because sometimes that helps, right? With dealing with a difficult conversation. Yeah, shit. All right. So again, hello everyone who's on and listening. And watching. We have 13 people watching right now. Ooh.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get started. We're first going to start to talk about getting into the community. So kind of your beginnings. So I'm going to first ask what got you into the podcasting community in the first place. And I'm going to ask this in the sense of what actually got you more active, even if you've already started, even if when you already started your podcast or even before you started your podcast. All right, who wants to jump in on this one first?
I'll jump in.
All right.
So I went through 2 stages. I didn't know about audio drama podcasting when I was developing my show. I found it afterwards. So the first, it was Google searches as I was trying to look up resources, which I think took me to Reddit, which took me to the audio drama production podcast, which I started listening to. And they plugged their Facebook group a lot. So I ended up in there. And then PodCon last December, the night before PodCon, when I was flying out there, I started tweeting about the show. I didn't know how Twitter worked. And Ellie, who's at Showmark, if you're in the community, you should be following her. Ellie retweeted the show and started talking about it. And the next day was doing a lot of work. She was wearing a yellow jacket and she's doing a lot of work saying, hey, if you see me, come say hi. I'm going to be here at noon. Try to come, if you want to meet up, come meet up. And that was my induction into the community. Most of the people after that stemmed from PodCon, people I met while there, and then Twitter.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I had sort of a similar experience. Well, it was almost like more 3 stages because I had joined Claudia Amenabar has put together like a podcasting listeners Slack, and I had joined that, and I don't remember how I found my way there. I think maybe through the feministing Slack or something. But I had joined that and was listening to that. And I started listening to audio drama like somewhere between 6 to 12 months. Well, no, like more than 12 months. I don't know. Somewhere between a year and a half before I started writing mine. But I was like actively listening and sort of participating in this fan community. And when I started working on mine, I posted something about the casting call for Unplaced in like June or July of last year, I think. Maybe May. Yeah, it was May because I remember the 1 year thing on Facebook. And Claudia was like, "Oh, hey, you should join this. You should join this Slack that's for people who work on audio dramas." And although I don't think she sent me the link to that until like August or September or October. So it was a while. And so I joined that and was like semi-active in there because I work from home and a freelancer and I'm desperate for social interaction. So I have Slack open all day. And then, I was at PodCon where I met Chad and Eli and a couple other people. And like after PodCon was when I felt like it was like really cemented because it was a little easier to like put names to faces. But before that, and even still after, Will Williams' Podcast Problems Discord is a really great community space that's just sprung up in the last like month or two. But before that, it was mostly like Slack and Twitter DMs and Twitter talking about shows and things going on with them.
Cool. All right. Who's next?
I'll go. So I got into podcasting with the second season of Ars Paradoxica. So I was kind of like brought aboard and I didn't know anything about it. And then working with them and then creating the Far Meridian, I started to see kind of the growing community, especially like on Twitter and the audio drama Slack and whatnot. And PodCon was really great to meet people, and like a lot of other people have experienced like building that community. And I'm based in LA, so we sometimes have meetups and whatnot, which has been really great for like networking and trying to continue to build a community.
Yeah, cool. All right, Anthony, you're up.
So I've sort of been like a ghost in terms of being, present in the community, because like I started not really knowing what audio drama or podcast. I mean, I didn't really listen to anything like even 3 months before I started, and it happened kind of just like really fast, and I didn't meet or talk to really anyone until I was already like, okay, this is happening. I've started, like, this is a thing. And that's why I always say I'm really lucky, because like the community just kind of rallied around this person who like didn't really show themselves and kind of just put something out. And that's why, like I haven't gone to a con yet. I've never even been to any con. So like I haven't really dove in yet, but with my shows, what ended up happening is I used to like narrate software training videos for companies. I'd be like, this is your tutorial on how to use Excel pivot tables. Like, and I would just narrate the thing and click around on the screen. And that's what I would do. And people were like, you should read books. And I was like, what do you mean? Like make audiobooks? And they were like, yeah, you should do that. And so I had been writing my whole life and I just never finished anything. I deleted everything I ever made. And then just based on that suggestion, I was like, I have something half written that I'll probably just delete. Why don't I just make an audio drama? Because I listened to, I think the first audio drama I ever listened to was The Once and Future Nerd. And it kind of just like blew my mind. And I was like, this is possible in a way that I didn't realize was possible. And so, yeah, I just kind of thought I'll try it. And I put out a trailer of 2298 and everything else just happened.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that we have right now a mix of people who they kind of went into the community like a con or like engaging on Twitter, and then we have experience of people kind of like who reached out to you, who brought you in. And I think there's a really interesting mix of experiences that can come from that. And I think that is really indicative of what community is. There are people who actively seek out, and there are people who actively from that community pull people in. And I think that's a really important thing to note about community. And I'm really excited to see this be a part of that too. All right. So moving on to another question, I'm going to kind of skip around in these questions, but how would you define the podcast community you are in? Like, how would you describe it to somebody else?
I would describe it as like, I want to say tight knit, but at the same time, there's like just so many different subsections. Like you can definitely tell like what creators are like closer with each other than others, but it's very fluid in that way and very supportive. Everyone's always promoting their shows. Everybody is always, maybe calling out some people in the industry who aren't so nice. I think that we're pretty good at like organizing and working together to achieve something, kind of like getting this podcaster roundtable together. But yeah, I think like tight knit and supportive would be kind of like the two big ways I would describe this community.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Like most of my description was. I have a very strong positive feelings. I have like some reservations about like podcasting as a whole, but for the most part, the communities that I'm in Everyone genuinely wants to support other people and indie creators, and is willing to like engage critically with media, which is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Eli said for a second about like, you know, the industry, you know, and things like that, and like those type of. It's funny because when you said community, like I didn't even think about that, and maybe that's just the way my brain works. With, you know, I'm certainly no notorious fan of corporate and things like that, but my brain doesn't even go to that. When I hear community, I really do think about just like those who I don't want to say aren't doing it for industry type purposes, like corporate type approaches, because obviously, you know, making money is important, and certain people have to, you know, as a creator. But when I think of the community, I think of just like friends and just like people that, you know, I talk to and have supported me and have just consistently, you know, liked and shared things, sent messages of support. Like I don't even necessarily think about it in terms of a business, and I try to, as much as possible, avoid it. Not saying that it's wrong, because like I said, for some it is a necessity and I want to respect that. But for me personally, when you were asking about community, I just think about it as friends who support my art, you know?
Yeah. And I think I'm going to jump in on this because I think it was in the latest Tuned In Dialed Up, which is Will and Gavin, who have their own podcast that talk about podcasting. Very meta. But,
and they're reviewers, right?
And they are reviewers. They are reviewers of podcasts.
Lovely.
They are amazing people. And actually in the last episode, they talked about this thing about what were they called? Like meta relationships or something like that, or the
parasocial relationships.
Relationship.
I remember because Will said this word to me, and I was like, I need to go look.
Yeah. So this idea that the community kind of has this weird, somewhat gray area, and somewhat, you know, something that to be noted, that it is a gray area of people who are both creators but also fans, that are friends but also colleagues, are, you know, that those relationships do exist in kind of a mushy gray zone. And I think that's important to note that in a lot of ways, it's really important to have good friendships that are part of that community, that you are offering support and help out of empathy and out of you know, good intentions. And that even though there is some people who consider themselves that they're running a business, or they are trying to make money in some capacity because they have to, or because that's how they're formatting their podcast, there's still this level of creating community as something that is acknowledges those structures, and at the same time acknowledges some of the gray areas and tries to navigate it in a way that's healthy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, so because for me, I think the fan thing was a big thing to me with our community. Is most of the creators are just really excited about audio drama, and we're excited about each other's work. I didn't know how Twitter worked, and I still don't really know how Twitter works, but mostly I just talk about shows I'm really excited about, and that's worked out really well. But yeah, it's an exciting space. As a community, because you have all these other creators work. People, can I name drop shows positively?
Yes.
Okay. Like I listened to Yarn Saxa Rising last year. And I tweeted about them like a week or two ago because they started their second season, and they're like, "We're so excited you're listening." I was like, I was literally no one when you did your first season, and I listened to this. You're excited I'm listening. Thanks. Great. I'm excited you're making this. But also just, there's always like, it's not in podcast form yet, but it's this audio drama called Salmon Run, which is one of the most unique. Every few months, I'm coming up with something entirely unique that I haven't experienced before. And with this one, it's this narration music video, like the dialogue is secondary. And I listen to that and like, this is why I listen to audio drama. This is why this space is really important, because it's accessible. So anybody who has an idea and a $50 mic can share that idea with other people. Absolutely.
Yeah, Eli, you had something that you wanted to add.
Well, just very quickly, I think it's interesting in this community specifically, people, like we very much lift each other up. And I think that no one is willing to like push anyone down while trying to attempt to reach their goals. Like, I think that's a very rare thing that you see in this community, which is pretty interesting. Like, I work in the entertainment industry and it's a little cutthroat. But it's kind of cool to like be a part of like this community where people like always want to support each other and it's never really a competition.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. And I think this kind of leads into my next question, which is, as we're kind of considering ourselves as collaborators rather than collaborators in a community, even if we're not direct collaborators with whatever we're doing, whether we're going to be a guest on somebody's podcast or where somebody's helping with editing or something like that. We also are, again, going back to kind of some of the initial comments of people who reach out outside of their community. This is something that I consider an important exercise in community, is actually reaching outside of your community and bringing people in who aren't just like you, but that might be able to benefit from and add something to the community. This includes people who across race. One thing I did want to note explicitly is we do not currently, we do have a couple of people of color. We do not have any Black people here. We don't have any specific people with physical disabilities that are apparent. People who have issues with sound processing in a way that we would have to set this thing up differently. So I kind of want to ask, when I say, like, how are ways that you're thinking about reaching out to other people outside of the community or on the fringes or are trying to start out, who are new podcasters? How do you make sure that you are also bringing people in, or how would you want to? Like, what are the things that maybe you're thinking of doing?
I'll jump in on this. I do a lot of this. I'm also in Los Angeles, and there are a lot of frustrated screenwriters out here with fantastic ideas. And when I meet them, particularly, people I've befriended, I show them audio drama. I say, jump in on this, get in on this. I don't want to, I don't know. I feel like if I talk about someone else's, an owning your experience, I have a pretty diverse crew on Station Blue. We have physical disability. We have all that I don't want to say this person is this. I want them to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's another thing too, where we talk about physical disability a lot and how it's just not represented in media at all. And when it is, it's not done well. And so I'm trying to keep that space. I'm going, I will produce a show for you. If you want to talk about your experience, I will do all of the work. So there's that, is seeking out people who have experiences that you haven't heard about in media, or people who have a project that you're really passionate about, but they're not aware of audio drama being a thing. I just dragged 20-Sided Stories, which is a kind of audio drama actual play, into the community because I was listening. I'm like, this is way more audio drama than actual play. They're like, we don't know what that means. It's like, I will show you. And now they're involved. But I also just try to scour for new shows. There's this show, the Thurin podcast, that I randomly found on a forum. And they said dark horror fantasy, which is my jam, and there's so little of it. And I listened and was going, hey, you've got a lot of good stuff here. Like, if you need any help, reach out. And now they're active on Audio Drama Sunday every week. So it's a mix of, I'm trying to let creators know, or people who could be creators know, that this thing exists and that it's great. And oddly enough, things like download numbers, showing, hey, this show has this big of an audience. This show just got turned into a TV show. I hate dropping status stuff like that, but it works. But then also looking at new creators who were in a similar position that I was, and talking to them and saying, hey, I listened to your show. I think 80% of my listening are shows that are under a season long, and I try to keep it to that. Like I just got to Wooden Overcoats, and it's been in my feed for like 7 or 8 months. So that's kind of how I do it, is I try to, find people, bring them in, find more people, bring them in.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else have ideas on this?
I mean, I know for me, Twitter has been the biggest tool, like one of the biggest tools at least. I definitely keep an eye out, like for people who are like interacting with, say, the Farmer Radiant or Ars Paradoxica, or even like my personal Twitter account, since I do tweet a lot about like the writing process and acting and just media in general. And I definitely reached out to people who I've like seen tweet like, oh, I'm writing an audio drama, or hey, I'm looking to get into the voice acting community. I'm not sure where to start. And I'm like, hey, hit me up. Let me know. My DMs are open. When I take breaks from Twitter, I end up giving people my email. So Twitter has been like a huge asset and like resource in that sense. And then also kind of like Chad, I'm really fortunate to live in LA where there are so many like writers and actors and like people who are in the creative industries. So it's been great to reach out to that community that way and just like go to plays and like find people who are really amazing and may not know that there's this completely other world that they could take part in. So I think, yeah, like Twitter and like actually just going out and like attending plays and stuff like that have been like huge resources to bringing people in.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm really bad at interacting, admittedly, just in general. Another audio drama podcaster and I have like joked that I'm like the JD Salinger of audio drama, because I just want to like hide in a cave and like work on stuff, and am scared to interact with the world on most occasions. But so for me, what I try to do is just sort of like lead by example as much as I can. Do you know what I mean? Where like I try to be very transparent when like I can't be on Twitter because it's like a lot, like it does something to my anxiety sometimes, you know what I mean? Just social media. And so like if I'm absent for a while, I'll try to like just tweet about how like, I'm feeling such and such a way, and sorry about that. Like I feel like the honesty brings people to you in a good way, in a healthy way, in a way that I didn't really do before the community, which is nice for me. As far as ideas in terms, I like, so one thing, and anyone who listens to Magic Kingdom knows that like I tried to write in like a deaf character, right? Like I tried to include that because I hadn't heard it yet, and maybe that was just my exposure or not. And I want to continue to try to reach out to different types of communities and people and everything else in terms of roles for stuff I create, because like I said, since I am bad at like interacting and pulling people in, I'll always need people to be a part of what I'm creating. So if I can get to know them and their experience and write it into something in a way that they read and say like, this is accurate, this is something that like I feel I want to be a part of, and it is a positive representation, then that's what I want to do moving forward. And so I think just in terms of what you were saying, ideas, I think it's more just what don't you hear represented and go find it, right? Like,
yeah. And I think this is
that person.
Yeah, this is something that I'm going to bring up a little bit in a couple other questions. But one of the people in our community, Lucy, I hope she's watching. She's a trans woman, and she's been talking about how some of these things around writing for other people outside of your experience as creators, and even when we are talking about nonfiction podcasting, people who are talking about certain topics, bringing in other guests, sometimes there is a blind spot, or when we don't reach outside of our experience to seek out other people or actually try to challenge ourselves to learn more about other people's experiences, we're doing ourselves a disservice as creators. So I really want to appreciate Lucy for bringing this up, and I'll get a little bit more on what she wanted to bring forward. She was going to be on this panel. Unfortunately, she's at work. But I wanted to give her voice into this a little bit too. And she did give me the permission to say that she's a trans woman and she wanted to give these experiences in her voice. So this is something that I think is really important, is like, yeah, find what are you not hearing? And this is kind of goes into this idea that, well, if I'm not of this experience, I shouldn't be writing it. Somebody else of this experience should write it. That's not necessarily true. You can do both. If you want to challenge yourself and, write a deaf character or write a trans character or write a character with physical disabilities, challenge yourself to make sure that you're writing the best way that you can, or bringing on people, like figure out how you best interact with that guest person, or how you find those people in those communities who need to have their voices raised up. I think this is a really important part of bringing people into the community and reaching outside of your comfort zone. Even if you're not someone who directly talks to people, you're at least doing the work of raising these voices and these stories up. So yeah, thank you, Anthony, for bringing that up.
Yeah, so I have been trying to organize my thoughts while listening to everyone else, because I have a lot. I know, yeah, I agree with, we just had some discussion about some of the stuff that you touched on with Lucy the other day in the podcast Problems Discord. And I agree with everything Lucy said in there. And I'm sure her later statements. I think that I have really complicated feelings on some of this stuff, because I think that it's really easy to unintentionally fall into sort of insular community building patterns. And I see some of that happening with the audio drama community. And this is not, me trying to be a downer or anything, but I see it happening. And I think that it's important that we talk about it so that we can actively work against those patterns, because it's not, I don't think that anyone is setting out to be yes, we should only work with people who have already worked in other audio dramas or things like that. But there's a lot of recurring roles, and something that I've been thinking about as I've been working on season 2 of Unplaced, and kind of working on, I have 3 other ideas that are much more full cast, but something that I've been thinking about is trying intentionally to cast people who are not big names, within, obviously there's some perspective there, because there's within the community, your average person off the street is not going to know who XYZ person is. But I've been trying to think about casting people who don't already have a platform. And I also understand why it happens from a marketing perspective, because if you can say hey, this person with XYZ Twitter followers and on these 3 podcasts that you already listened to was on my podcast, then that's an extra marketing boost. But I don't think, I don't want to put marketing ahead of welcoming people into the community. And I don't mean to say that other people have been doing that either. It's just something that I've been thinking about a lot lately with some of these conversations that have been happening in the Discord. So for me, I'm trying to, things that I'm thinking about as I'm working on season 2 of Unplaced is specifically, and I don't know if this is the best way to do it. I'm super inexperienced. I don't have any kind of a theater or production background, or I dropped out of college after 1 semester. I have literally no training in any of this. So I don't know if this will affect the quality of the end product, but something that I've been thinking about doing is specifically reaching out to people where I have heard little snippets of their work and being hey, I think you would be good for this role. Is this something that you would be interested in? Which I also realize has some downsides versus posting an open casting call. But it's something that I'm trying to do and intentionally think about when it goes to season 2 of Unplaced or other things, so that I'm trying to intentionally bring these people in and give them more opportunities that they might not be getting otherwise. When it comes to reaching out to other creators, I try really hard to talk about it whenever I'm talking with frustrated writers, you know, like Chad mentioned, one of my friends lives in LA and is like a frustrated screenwriter and who's been dealing with like Hollywood politics. And so I've been telling her for like months, like, hey, whenever you want to get into the podcasting community, just like say the word. I have Discord links. I have Slack links. Like I have Twitter hashtags. Like I'm ready to throw all of this at you and just like drown you in love. And like I've been trying to do that with like other friends of mine as well who are, you know, like want to do something, have that urge to create, but like don't necessarily want to write a novel and certainly don't have the resources available to do even like a DIY web series or something, because that gets really expensive really fast. And so can podcasting. Like podcasting still requires some base amount of time and resources. I think that's everything. Sorry, I feel like I talked in circles there, but yeah.
I think
that was great. Yeah, I'd like to add to that if possible.
Go for it.
Something to reach out to the people out there, because ideally this is getting out to a variety of people. I know we're mentioning Discords and Slacks, and we're talking about each other like we know each other, which we do, but we know each other through interacting with our works, through Twitter. I met Michelle and I met Eli at PodCon, but it's not like we exchanged numbers. It was one of those, I trust I'm going to interact with you more. And I've been lucky to have that happen. I mean, for one, we've mentioned Podcast Problem Discord multiple times. It's open, really supportive community. It's a mix of creators and listeners and, you know, anything in between. But you don't feel like coming into this that everybody already knows each other or the gates are closed by any way, shape, or form. I didn't have any interaction with people until PodCon, and then I had very few. And you don't need to go to PodCon either. Hop on Audio Drama Sunday, Twitter. You know, you can join a lot of these groups. But I wanted to highlight that just because for me, who was I talking to? We're talking about the various levels of like when I was at PodCon, I was like, oh, this person's really cool. They have like 3 episodes of their show out yet, or out right now. And then I was talking to them later and they're like, oh yeah, next PodCon, I'm going to have a whole season out. Then I'm going to be with all these. It's like, oh, we're all looking at each other the exact same way. So I would say, I just really want to highlight, it is accessible. There are other people doing audio drama who have no idea that this thing is happening and are in complete other bubbles. I'm trying to find them. Like I know YouTube has like an audio drama presence that I don't understand and I'm trying to decipher. But that's just something I wanted to throw in there is we've become friends through mutual respect and interacting online and everything, but that's not necessarily how we started. And that's not necessarily how you're going to start. I was a very late addition to most of these groups. And I mean, Anthony's very well respected and we love his work and he's on this panel. Despite having a different way of engaging. So there's many roads to Rome. Is that how that goes?
Yeah. So
I appreciate your polite way of saying different way of engaging. That was very polite, and I appreciate that.
I am rabid. I don't expect anybody to do. I'm constantly listening to shows, and making audio drama is really difficult, and we all have lives. That's just something that works for me in my life. That doesn't mean other people have to do this. For me, it's just like I have the time to do this, so I'm doing that to help lift up other shows and strengthen the community. But that doesn't mean that it's a bar by any set. You know, you're doing just as much for the community as I am, as Lisette is anybody. Everybody who's adding to it, we're adding it to it in specific ways. And there's going to be people watching this who are inspired by you saying like, Twitter makes me nervous. Like, I'm not into this, because they're going to go, I also am not into Twitter. I think that's a common experience, and know that they can still make a really good show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, please.
No, go ahead. This is circling back to something. So if you're still on topic, do your thing.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I'm the type of person where like I want to engage directly and fully, and I'm always super nervous about it. But like when I do it, that's how I want to like engage. And sometimes like Twitter or Discord, it feels like I'm in a room with a lot of people. And being in a room with a lot of people makes me nervous, right? And so like, it's just one of those things where sometimes I do feel like, okay, I'm behind the glass of my phone, right? Like I feel okay. And sometimes I'm really engaged and excited, and I have the energy to do it. And honestly, I wish I could drill down and figure out where it comes from, but I do appreciate you, you being so nice about it and saying those things. So thank you.
All right, Eli?
I wanted to circle back something really quickly about writing from perspectives that aren't your own.
Yes.
Because there are, quite a few people of intersecting minority identities and whatnot. And I think that sometimes people can kind of fall into this thinking that because they have some sort of minority identity or intersecting minority identities, that they are immune from criticism and critique when they write from other minority perspectives.
Yes.
And I think it's something to be really mindful of, and to kind of be okay when you get it wrong. I mean, it sucks and it doesn't feel good, but if you want to do right by other people, so it's just so important to really listen when people from those communities speak up and say hey, you didn't quite get this right, or you're kind of falling into this stereotype regarding this identity, and to just really not only actively listen, but then implement what you've learned. And that's something that kind of concerns me, because I know that there's the one thing where people are afraid to write from any other perspective other than their own, which is understandable. But then there are the people who think that they are immune from improving on their representation of other identities.
Yeah.
And it's something that has happened in some shows. It's something that we're all kind of working on, but it's something that I think should really kind of be a very active ongoing conversation within the community, just to make sure we want to do right by other people, and that includes not only in the community but also in our writing.
And there are consultants available. If you get a hold of us or anybody else, there's people who will consult and look over your scripts. Ideally pay them, but if not, reach out. Yeah.
So I have a question from Sarah from Girl in Space, who's curious to hear more about the audio drama community on YouTube, on any insights. I think this might be something that we can talk about when we're other platforms, specifically building community, your own podcasting community, and what forums that you set up your podcast in, whether it's websites or Twitter or YouTube or SoundCloud or hosting, all that stuff. I think that's, do you guys have any experience at audio drama on YouTube, really quickly before you move to another?
I can give you my briefest experience. So we have different, I tend to go into places where I'm trying to think how to phrase it. I'll just say it. I will go on Reddit. I will go on Facebook groups that are, they would see this panel and go, you're being too sensitive, you're being all that. And I try to, in going there, that's where I found that stuff. I also find in some of those Facebook groups, people have put thousands of dollars into shows and they're like, cool, I'm getting 10 downloads a day. And I was like, I just did an article on how to Twitter for the audio drama production podcast, just because it's telling people you can, it's fine to get 10 downloads a day, but you can get a lot more than 10 downloads a day. And so that's what I've seen people who don't interact with Twitter. I think Twitter's probably the best that I know social media platform you can interact with when it comes to building an audience right now. But on the Facebook groups, I see people who have been making audio drama for 20 something years. They're coming from the mentality of golden age of radio. And then on Reddit, people are just nonstop posting YouTube links, usually little horror stories. I haven't really checked them out. I imagine they're no sleep inspired. But that's something I'm currently trying to dig into. I'm trying to find out who are you, who's watching this? Can you, do you want to come over here? Do we want to go over there? So it's very brief. It's, expeditions are currently underway.
All right. We'll hear you back when you come back from the field.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm gonna move into another section. I just want to say that we have about 10 minutes until the hour. But if anybody has to leave, you're totally fine. I do want to check in to see if anybody can stay over. I do want to get further into this concept of gatekeeping, because I think that's really important, as well as the future of the community, or what we're hoping for. So how is everybody's time?
I have literally nothing to do this afternoon, so.
All right.
I wouldn't be awake right now if it weren't for this, so I've got plenty of time.
Okay. And then you have a nap, okay?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I will probably have to leave maybe 5 or 10 minutes after. So like 10:05, 10:10, I'll have to bounce, unfortunately.
Okay. So in that case, Eli, I'm actually going to ask you to answer some of these questions first, okay? So that if you have the ability to say what's on your mind about this. So when we're talking, so this is really, like, to be honest, one of the impetus moments of creating this panel was a number of people who were denigrating the certain types of podcasting, including audio drama, including other types of like interview, or like, people saying like stereotypical things about certain areas of podcasting. And that people were really concerned about, like, is this going to push out people who want to start something and they find like, oh, I want to start this thing that people are saying bad things about. And that was really concerning for a lot of us. And one of the reasons why we wanted to put this together, Julia Schaffini and I at least started up the Slack and a number of people in the community spread the word in terms of like, we do need to be accountable to our own community and make sure that we are doing things and modeling behaviors that are, and learning things that make our community healthy and resilient against majority culture that wants people to separate out. And a lot of people don't know how to deal with conflict, don't know how to deal with, opening a door that's being shut by someone who's technically more powerful, interacting with power dynamics. Again, going back to that Tuned In Dialed Up episode by Will and Gavin, when they talked about, how those parasocial relationships work when you have power differentials or entitlements and all that, stuff that can be pretty ugly, right? So I really want to start off, and Eli, if you can please answer first, is, what does gatekeeping mean to you? And what are some of the uncomfortable, bad behaviors? Again, no naming names, but again, patterns of behaviors or red flags that you try to keep in mind so that you're protecting yourself and the community that you're engaging in.
I think one of the big things that I've noticed with people who denigrate the, specifically like audio drama community or indie podcasting community in general, is that they don't understand the differences in experience. The really amazing thing about indie podcasting is that anyone can join. I mean, yes, there is, the resource and time that is needed, but, you don't need an agent or a manager to get into this like cool creative space. And so as a result, you have people who don't have a lot of experience, who want to get into it, want to try it, want to have fun, and they're learning. And, there may be a quality difference because of that difference in experience. And I think people who, are super well known, maybe they're with a podcasting network, they just don't understand that these people are in that learning process, and they should be allowed to feel safe in that learning process as they continuously get better. So there's just this interesting dissonance in people's understanding of, what people new to the medium are bringing to the table. For example, like if you are running an incredibly like successful, big like audio drama or whatever, and like you went to, school for like writing, and you have actors who have been trained and whatnot, like you have that, so many years of experience to make that production good, like to make it sound like really high quality and whatnot. And meanwhile, there are some people who are maybe new and are still kind of figuring out what they can do, and they're learning. And so I think that, you know, because it's on the internet and it's kind of, you know, immortalized on the internet, people just don't understand that like the experience backing up some of these productions is just different. And it's, you know, I think it's a lot better to be supportive and allow people to get better and to give people that space. So I think that's kind of one of the big issues that I've seen in gatekeeping, is just this misunderstanding of how people are using the medium.
Yeah, and I think I've seen that too in nonfiction podcasting. One of the things that is very apparent is that there are a lot of people who are also trying to figure out how to interview people. Most people don't have a journalism background when they're starting off their podcasting, and especially some of the types of content that's out there, or interview styles, or especially people. I was just in and met up with, talking again about other communities, like meeting up with women of color podcasters here in DC. It was amazing because I was able to talk to people who were like just starting out, or they're just starting to plan out some stuff. Some of them have writing backgrounds. Some of them have just like policy, and because this is DC, like nonprofit style backgrounds. And these are women of color who are also trying to find their own voice. And I think it's really important that we support that is especially people who don't get a voice, because this medium is so at like a low barrier of entry, that the people who are reaching that low barrier because they're still learning or still trying to figure out what their voice is, there needs to be even more understanding and support and offers of like, hey, you're doing great. This is exactly the place you need to be, and the place that you're trying to get to is here. These are kind of the steps. And that's kind of, I think, incumbent upon us to really give that platform its dues. That if we have been doing this for a year versus someone who's been doing it for a month, there is a different level of understanding or support that is needed. So yeah, I definitely, Eli, you nailed it. That's exactly some of the things I've been thinking about too. Any other? I'm going to ask you guys too about your experience in gatekeeping. And then I'm going to get into what Lucy was talking about with regards to her experience in gatekeeping specifically.
Do you have any other questions you wanted to ask Eli about too? Because I can
Good
wait.
point. All right, so I will
not to disrupt what you were going for, but I'm good to hang out. So yeah. I'd love to hear what she has to say.
Excellent. So I will then, Eli, if you're comfortable with me asking a couple more.
Pressure's on. Let's go.
All right, let's go. I'm going to kind of combine a couple of questions that are kind of looking forward. So what do you see in the future of podcasting that includes things like monetization, podcast networks, silo issues, and sometimes what is like the balance between engaging with, we talked about this a little bit, of engaging with community and balancing your own individual pursuits, and any weaknesses that you see in the community right now, and things that can provide a little bit more solid foundation. And I'll ask you one last question after you kind of pick through your thoughts on that.
Gotcha. As far as the future of podcasting, I mean, I kind of going back to what I said earlier within the community, how there's kind of, you can tell when certain creatives are friends, and, they're a little closer than they're with the rest of the community. And I think that there's definitely going to be kind of more of these like collectives kind of being built. Like I'm a part of the Whisper Forge collective, which came out of Ars Paradoxica and whatnot. And I've noticed like there are some other production collective groups. So I think that is probably going to be something that becomes more prevalent. But at the same time, because we're all still so fluid and interacting with everybody else, we can still, kind of be a part of this greater whole. And then as far as like monetization and stuff, I don't like thinking about that, I'll be honest. It's interesting because I do work in the entertainment industry, and I will say that they're always looking for IP. So I do think that we will probably see more audio dramas getting attention from, you know, film and television. And as far as, you know, people, you know, balancing audio drama with other pursuits, I think that there are a fair amount of people who are doing audio drama because they wanted to get into film and television. So I think there's just going to be this interesting like fluidity of people kind of coming in and out. And I think so long as we can recognize that and be supportive of not only the work of an individual, but the individual themselves, if they say, hey, you know what, I love audio drama, but I think I kind of want to go do this other thing now, to, you know, for us to like recognize that that is that person's choice and to encourage them to, you know, pursue what they're really looking for, is incredibly important. And also to welcome people back, you know, because I have a feeling that it's going to be hard to stay away from the audio drama community for a lot of us.
Aw, so true. It's so true. Thank you so much, Eli. That was actually that was a really great summary of a lot of things I think has kind of like been discussed, but I think you brought together that that's kind of the nature of community too. There's some people who need to leave for a while that might come back, people like, you know, floods of people coming in, and then maybe like stagnant periods, to really understand that community is a fluid and porous construct. And allowing for that, and identifying some of the maybe downfalls of those things too, because there's plenty of people who might feel like if they saw people leaving, like doing film or doing TV or you know, finding or writing books instead, that they were like, oh, are we not good enough anymore? I think that's a really important thing to also like stop and think about, is what the community needs versus what the individual needs, and being able to balance that a little bit. I do want to say, Michelle said that they had to jump off real quick. They're going to be right back on. But Eli, I do want to, I know we're just about finished with what you are able to say. One last thing. What are the core things you want people to get from this panel project?
Oh man, gosh. I think I really would love if people understood how open the lines of communication are. Like we've been talking about, a lot of us are available online, and I know that future panelists will also, you know, we all lurk on Twitter and Tumblr and all the social media. But I think that I really want people to understand that lines of communication are open, and it's okay to talk about uncomfortable stuff. Like it's okay, and it's gonna feel uncomfortable, and it's not gonna be the most pleasant thing, but I think it's gonna be really necessary, and I hope that it's something that people can really feel empowered to take part in. So,
thank you. Seconded. All right, Eli, I think that's about, unless you have any final thoughts about what you feel about this personally, of your experience on this community. Any last words?
You know, mostly appreciation, you know, like even the times when I've gotten frustrated, I've still kind of been able to see that this community as a whole is, you know, pretty solid. And I just really honestly look forward to seeing the other panels as well. So not just being a part of this one, but also being a viewer for the other ones. And thank you so much for having me. I was really happy to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Eli. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to answer these questions. I appreciate your work, and you're doing great. I'm really excited to see more that comes out from your amazing head.
Okay.
All right.
Seconded.
I'm sorry in advance.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yes, just murder us with feelings. It's okay.
Yeah, it's my job at this point.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you. You're free to go.
All right, well, thank you. Bye, guys. It was a pleasure.
Bye. All right.
So gatekeeping, right?
All right, gatekeeping. Well, real quick, I'm going to say I apologize to everyone. I probably should have asked Eli if any of you guys had any questions for her. I'll keep that in mind. That's a thing for me to learn. If any of you guys want to ask anything of her, she is awesome. She is very responsive. So at her on Twitter, and I probably should have given everybody their. That's another thing to learn. Woo.
YouTube descriptions.
Okay. YouTube and okay, so Eli, I do follow her. So her Twitter handle for everybody is Eli Lizzie Lisbeth. It's ELIZZIELIZBET. You can also rewind this video so you can get that too. Sorry. All right. I think I did my job. Now, actually, I do want to, back to gatekeeping. I do want to give Lucy her voice on this right now, and then you guys can also please contribute your thoughts around gatekeeping, how to avoid gatekeeping, how to open the door to new audience. We talked about like opening the door to other podcasters, but also in a way that takes care of them and also is aware of the downfalls of gatekeeping. Because at the same time, gatekeeping can be useful. If there is something that you want to bring up of how gatekeeping in certain contexts are useful, I want to hear it. But also, we want to discuss these the red flags, people who have patterns of behavior that can be damaging to the community. And because we do want to raise those so that people who are watching can also think about what are the red flags because unfortunately we live in a hellscape right now. So knowing your red flags and especially giving those red flags as options to consider for new community members, I think is very crucial to keep upkeeping the health and protecting newcomers. So one of the things that I'm going to bring up that Lucy talked about was she comes from the experience of trying to get into the acting. She is actually a pretty amazing contributor to the community in terms of supporting other people's work. She's trying to get her stuff done, I know. But she's also trying to do some acting, and she says that she's been auditioning for things. And one of the patterns that she noticed that is a gatekeeping indicator is people are putting up casting notices. And this can also be people who are looking for guests for their interview show or, people that want to tell stories about certain people. She sees a pattern of people saying, please apply. Yes. Even if you're trans, if you are a person of color, you're encouraged to audition, even if the roles are not explicitly written for people of color to fill. One of the things that she notes is an issue is her voice, that people have told her that her voice does not pass as cisgender, that she has felt frustration that people who are like, yeah, you can audition for this female character, this woman character, but you have to sound specifically like what my idea of a woman's voice sounds like. And I think one of those things are something that I brought up again in the Discord, because she was also talking about this privately to me and in the Discord itself, that even though the bars of entry are low, there are still constructs of majority culture that can influence how we cast and how we bring people on. For example, I think about something like, what if we bring someone who is deaf and does speak aloud and who wants to act? How can we, as creators, as directors, as people who want to bring people into the community, say there is a place for you to speak where you don't just have to be the deaf character. You can be any of these characters, especially if you're able to connect with us or find these open casting calls, for example, that even when we say open casting calls, the default often goes to white, cis, and sometimes male, if the gender isn't specified. I think this is something that is an important note around gatekeeping that goes around kind of unconscious biases that I think, like Eli said before, and a couple of you guys said before too, that we're kind of picking actors that are already in the community. And Michelle, they said it perfectly, that as a creator, you're actually trying to get people who don't have a platform yet or are new actors.
Yeah.
So what are some of the ways that you think, that you don't want, that resisting the siloing, resisting the insularity, or I know some people call it like incestuous urges or instincts that most people fall back to because they aren't given ways in which how to resist that, how to get and reach outside of those urges.
Yeah,
I have a lot, but if I go, I will talk for forever. So maybe you should go first, Chad.
I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it punchy. All right, keeping it punchy. I come from a background that doesn't represent me, right? I have, for example, we're dropping things. I'm not cis, but I have white male privilege and experience, but I don't have privilege with the other thing. I've been in the head of being, a conservative Christian. I've been in the head of, because that's how I grew up. And I'm so much the opposite of that. But as a result, usually when I see people saying things, I know where they're coming from. I know what they're thinking because I've thought those thoughts before. And I think we still are very much representative of majority culture. It's just a small majority. It's a progressive majority, but there's still so much that we don't understand, so much that we don't see. Right now in the audio drama community, from what I've seen, like usually, like I've never gotten flacked for this cis thing. You have a lot of LGBTQI plus like representation, but for example, disability, physical disability. Because I talk a lot about mental disability, which is something I have extensive experience with, mental illness. But with physical disability, I am a toddler at best when it comes to understanding these things. The person who taught me to write is physically disabled and talks about this a lot. And I would love for her to, get involved in the community and let her, let people know what that is. Yeah. But as many times as I've, tried to understand or tried to dig in, I am still so far behind. I still fall into ableist patterns. There's just, and it's clear talking to her as I see the way her eyes move is she's just like, okay, yes, I've heard this 1,000 times. In the same way where I've heard certain things 1,000 times and other people here have heard things 1,000 times, where Lucy's like, these people don't know they're doing it because they're doing it as individuals, but this is a pattern that is cultural that I'm experiencing. And so when it comes to, like, for example, physical disability, which I think we have very, very little representation in the audio drama community, that is something I fall into all the time and something I'm working on. And for me, since I came from kind of the majority main thing, it's like, okay, I can see I've come this far, assuming I have way more than that far to go. But that's, yeah. And then touching on one more thing before I cede the floor is when it comes to, being incestuous, cliques, I'm very sensitive to the idea of cliques, both things that appear to be cliques and things that are just straight up cliques. Yeah. Because I mean, we're on this panel, so that's going to be, people are going to automatically group us as, oh, these are audio drama creators that are on this panel, right? And other people are on this panel are going to be lumped in the group, or audio drama creators who go to PodCon. And that's something that it's great because I really appreciate all of you and I admire you. it's also something that I'm constantly working on, making sure it doesn't develop as a thing where it's like an insular community, because none of us own this space. I think this is completely my opinion here. I think the best thing we can do is provide resources, provide things like this panel, provide points of view, but you can't set rules, right? We don't own this space. People could come who drive us nuts, who have completely contradictory worldviews, and they could also start up their own audio drama, community and space. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but that's something that trying to just constantly keep the gates open, because it is easy. You find your group, especially a lot of us are stressed out individuals. It's and a lot of us, a lot of it is people are for the first time in their life having a space of people who are creators, where they can, I've seen a lot of people's identities really come out in this community, which I think is a really beautiful thing. I think that's a great thing a show can provide, is characters and representation, so people go, oh, that's me. Like I just watched an entire X-Men show because I heard they had a good bipolar character, which I've never seen before. What's it called? The Gifted, I think. And I watched in Polaris. I was like, oh, you did bipolar, right? And I watched the entire show, and that was, to me, I'm like, oh, this is representation, because I watched this entire show that I normally wouldn't watch just because they did this one character right. Yeah. So continuously doing that so people can evolve and come up, but a lot of people have, some more than others have had to fight for this space where they're accepted. And when you fight for space and then you get ground, then you siege up, right? You kind of build defensive things. And I think some people need to do that, and that's fine. But I don't think should be a universal
expectation. Yeah.
Yes, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think I kind of went talking about, like, freaking out when you're like, they did this character right. I felt like I cried every single episode of One Day at a Time. Yeah. One Day at a Time, because they were, even though most of the actors were Puerto Rican, I'm half Cuban, and being able to see a Cuban family like that, like, actually act out and actually have issues around, like, gender and sexuality and politics, like, dude, I cried every single episode because I'm like, this is my family. And their last name is Alvarez. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But, like, I think this touches upon a really important distinction of what seating the floor. And I think one of the things I really want out of this panel is the fact that it is rotating, and that it's going to rotate both moderators and panelists, that we be very, very aware of who we're bringing on. And even if that means we put a little bit more effort in looking for people who can be represented, that now this is established, this is a thing now. We've kind of, opened up a door for ourselves too, for the community to showcase our thoughts and feelings. I really want this to be a little bit more radical. Like, people can put on panels, that people can bring in other people, their friends, people that they know that are outside the community that might not be in the podcasting community, but be really great at talking about sound editing. Like, that kind of thing, I think, is really important. And one of the reasons I wanted Lucy to come on is because she is a new creator. So I do also want to see more interactions with people and more panels that have new creators, or people who haven't even thought about or are just trying to start to think about creating something. I think that's really important for keeping the door open. All right, so so Michelle, you actually have been talking a lot. I'm actually going to cede this over to Anthony. I'm going to point at you, and you're going to talk a little bit about what your thoughts are coming through your head.
Well, to circle back to the initial sort of casting comments, in terms of having it be open and then still sort of going with a specific, I would say, right with intention, right? Like, I I think that's one of the most important things is like know who your character is and what you're trying to do. And I think that writing with that intention will help. And I think what we were talking about before, combined with that in terms of going out, seeking out these stories, seeing, like looking at the scale and seeing like, all right, I see tons of this. I don't see a lot of this. I'm going to go seek that out. I'm going to go seek out those experiences, those people, immerse myself in those situations with those people, talk to those people, listen more than you speak, and then just like write something specifically for that purpose, to bring that experience and to bring that idea into the community. And I think then you might avoid some of those situations where, you know, you're sort of misled, like, because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like that, you know, you're in a situation where you're being misled, that there's an opportunity there for you when there isn't. And I think that onus to me goes to the writer. I think if the writer is not writing with that specific intention, to either put their story out into the universe or to put a story that is representative of something important to them or representing somebody else's experience, that's like sort of, why are you doing it, right? So you know, that's sort of my thoughts on that. As far as just in general, I think that for me, it's just more my place to, like I said, listen, seek out different experiences, what I'm not seeing in the community, and just try to be a conduit if I can. You know what I mean? Like if there's anything I can do, I want to do it, and just sort of listen and be told what those good things to do are.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think that's going back to why one of these ground rules is active listening is it's a skill. It's something that you got to develop. It's something that you can practice, that you are never yet. And I think this is something that I think it was Eli who said that, like, we need to be careful that because some of us have certain intersecting qualities that are minority or certain intersections of oppression, we're never going to know everything. We're never going to really understand, you know, what, like, we haven't even talked about some of the big gap of non-Western, non-English podcasts or stories. Even though radio is something that is huge in non-Western communities. I think those are things to keep in mind of just keep listening, keep seeking out, like, keep challenging yourself. We're all human. We have to be able to continue to learn, to become more human, to become better humans.
Yeah, just to expound on that, because it's more for me, like, writing is about exploring my own humanity and like understanding how I work, right? And like that curiosity extends to every single person on earth. Like, I'm so ridiculously curious in every single person that I ever meet. Like, I take a Lyft every day to work and they probably hate me because one Lyft driver actually was like, "You talk a lot." And I was like, "Actually, I don't." Like, it's just in this situation, I know I'm never going to see this person again, most likely. They have a really cool, unique story that I can get in like 20 minutes from them, right? Like, I don't get the full picture. I just get like a snapshot. It's like a short story, like on the way to work. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like that's sort of what I'm saying, where no matter if you're privileged or not, I think looking out and just seeing the beauty and exploring every single person's humanity in writing, how it's not only like rewarding, but fun. I don't know why you wouldn't try to, you know, almost like experience it all.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll never be able to experience it all, but actually at least seeking that out as a goal to keep pushing, to keep challenging yourself, to keep reminding yourself to listen, to understand that things change, I think is really important. And Michelle, I'm going to go to you on this because I want to hear actually your thoughts specifically. How do you balance being supportive of the podcasting community while also holding it accountable to better its faults?
I don't know. It's really hard. Like, Lucy and I have had conversations about this because both of us like are aware of some of the trends, like for like, you know, the insularity with casting, for example. Like we've talked extensively about that. And I don't know, like, I think that this is something that we're definitely going to have to reckon with because it gets really weird when you know everyone. Like when you know who you're talking to, how are you like, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but like every single woman character that you've introduced so far in this season was either somebody's significant other or like died on screen. Like you have a lot of like, I don't know how to, and the best I can do is just like try to be tactful, I guess, because I'm aware that indie creators are already under a lot of pressure. And I try, like, I tried to talk about it without, you know, sounding like I don't want to sound like I'm subtweeting anyone. Like basically, like if I have a problem with a specific person, I will usually try to address it with them in some way. So nothing is like directed at any specific person, but like I have definitely noticed patterns that I'm not really sure how we should address. Like one of the things that I've noticed is that people are pretty okay at recognizing like some patterns with resources. But for example, like the vast majority of the podcasting community, as far as I can tell, based on conversations that I've had and comments that have been made and context clues that I've picked up on, as far as I can tell, the majority definitely seems to be college educated and like never have lived through like extreme poverty. And like, I have literally been so poor that I like stole toilet paper from a public bathroom. And so that's something that like Lucy, like it's not, And like, and that's something that like Lucy and I have talked about, because I don't think people necessarily realize that sometimes when they're talking about like the accessibility of the community. And then it's like, oh, well, how did you get started? And it's like, oh, I was, you know, like I already knew how to do this from this class I took in college. And then like I was friends with, I just happened to be like I went to a liberal arts school. So like I already knew an audio engineer and 3 actors like in my close friend circle. And it's like, okay, well, I don't actually like really have that. Like most of the people that I know like are not, you know, working in tech, or like most of my friends are not necessarily working in tech or like come from that background. And like, I don't come from that background. Like I was afraid to put up the transcripts for Unplaced for the first season of Unplaced because I knew that they weren't properly formatted for script writing, because I was trying to learn how to do that. And it was holding me up so much that I was like, whatever, this season is going to be completely single, like almost completely single narrator. So I'm just going to do the best I can. And I was like really nervous that somebody was going to be like, wow, this person is just like full of shit. Like they don't know what they're doing, because that's how it feels a lot of the time. And I think that those patterns come up. And I also think that, and I say all of this from like a point of love. Like I let like the audio drama community, like podcasts, like literally probably saved my life. I don't think I would have made it through 2016 without podcasts. So like, I'm not, you know, trying to like shit on anybody or be a Debbie Downer, but it's just something like I care about it so much that I want to see people addressing it. Because I see like the resources thing, I see the bar being set in indie podcasting by people who might not have like a podcast network, but they still have more resources than I do. Like because of who my friend circle is, because I don't have like this alumni network from college, the people that I'm collaborating with are often like strapped for cash or strapped for time or both. So like for Serendipity City, which is my actual play podcast, like I do everything. Like I pay an audio engineer because I do not have the time to do that. And like being able to pay Brendan is like a privilege in and of itself. But like, that's literally like my second biggest line item every month after rent. So like it's frustrating because you feel like you're being held up to a standard that you don't like. I don't physically know how I could meet the standards of a podcast that has like 3 to 5 people and they're all rotating writing and rotating sound editing, and like somebody's working on social media and somebody's working on the transcripts. Like I physically can't do that. And I could try, but I would have a nervous breakdown within 2 weeks. And like I kept coming out of 2 weeks that were very bad mental health wise. Like I don't want to do that to myself, but it feels like that's sort of the standard that's being set without acknowledging the amount of resources that it takes to get to even that standard. And I think that something else that there was a really good Twitter thread, which I'll try and find the link to. But I think that like we need to be aware of, I don't want to say grading on a curve because that sounds like really patronizing, but like you were talking about with like being aware of where somebody is at in the podcasting journey. There was a really good thread by someone who was writing as, I believe, an autistic trans person, definitely autistic. I'm not sure on the rest. And they were talking about how like it's extremely frustrating for them to be held up to the same standards as like a young person coming from like a neuroatypical perspective, to be held up to the same standards as somebody who is like, who doesn't have to deal with those struggles. And I think that we should be considering that just having those perspectives, even if it is not like technically as good as that 5-person crew where everyone has enough time and energy to contribute, I think we should really be talking about how just having that perspective in the community is a huge value in and of itself. It doesn't have to be as technically good. And I don't, you know, I'm not saying that we should like patronize people, but I think that that's something also that we should be thinking about. Crap, there was something else I was going to say. Oh, the last thing that I wanted to say is that I also think we should be aware of like so there's this thing that happens where like when there's statistically an imbalance, people will like, once it's even starts to get slightly corrected, people will be like, oh, this is like fixed. So like an example, there was some studies done by the Gina Davis Institute of Media where like when women are speaking like 30% of the time in scenes, it's like 25 to 30%. People think that they're speaking like 50%. And when it's actually at 50%, people presume that women are speaking like the majority of the time. So even in our little community, and definitely within indie podcasting as a whole, I think there's this tendency to be like, oh, like we've got diversity nailed on like these two fronts. And like, definitely do not get me wrong, like podcasting is way more white than it is like cishet. But I think that people, cisgender and heterosexual, sorry. But I think that people will tend to be like, oh, like we're really good on this one front. And it's like, I kind of want to challenge that a little bit because don't get me wrong, we are doing a lot better than mainstream media. But like, I would be surprised if podcasting is like 40, oh God, I can't do math on the fly. Like 45% men, 45% women, 10% non-binary. I would be surprised if we've hit like that. I would be surprised if it's like, it's definitely not like 50-50 cisgender, transgender, or probably like, I don't know what the overall statistics for society are like, but I think that there is I think that there's a chance to be like, okay, well, we've checked these diversity check boxes, so we don't need to think about those as much. And I really want to challenge that because of like the story tropes that I've seen people fall into, like inside, even in like our little pocket, which is like pretty queer friendly. Like I've seen people fall into story tropes or fall into casting tropes, like some of the stuff that Lucy has experienced and talked about. And I don't know, like, I honestly do not know how we can like address it as a community. And for me, like, it's really scary because I feel like I just got it. Like, I don't feel like an established community member. And I feel like I just got in here and like already am like I feel like I am not like as established as other people. So like, there's this fear of like, okay, like we want to talk, like, I want to talk about this. And I genuinely want to talk about it from like an open and honest perspective. But like, I don't know how to do that without ruining the community vibe or without like cutting myself off from a community that like I need for support and for mental health, you know?
Yeah. I see you as an integral part of the community. And also I love everything you're saying. Every time you're like, I'm going to be a Debbie Downer, I'm like, yes, yes. What's the point of having these panels if we're just going to talk about the comfortable, like, oh, we're doing such a good job of this. Yes. So much, everything you said. And that maybe that'd be a good panel to have is people, you know, there's this amazing panel at PodCon, how to write straight characters. It was satire. It was all gay people on the panel just talking about writing straight characters the way straight panels talk about writing gay characters. That really highlighted, and maybe those would be some good panels to have. Have one on mental illness. Like, I know nobody does mania right, and I don't blame them for it. But yeah, because I think, for example, if we had Lucy and others with similar experience on a panel, and just any type of group, and they could highlight, this is my casting experience. And then you're going to have so many creators watching that going, oh, I do that. I do that so much. Okay, I know not to do that, because I think generally people are willing to learn, but you have to learn by listening to others. I've definitely learned that in my life. But yeah, everything you're saying, especially when it comes to diversity and stuff, it's like I relate to too many shows that I listen to. I should not be relating to like 50% of the audio drama out there. It should be so far out of my experience that I'm like, oh, I'm not really into this. Whereas most audio drama I listen to, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is like, because I can still appreciate a show. But I think that's always an important mark in diversity, is at what point do you have enough of this thing where you can be like, I don't really like these, they're fine. I don't really like these, I really love these, and these are like pretty good. Because until then you're just like, oh, I like these because they're this and that. And especially with you're talking like most creators on shows that are bolstered for diversity are not necessarily part of those demographics themselves. So I want to hear those voices so bad.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to add as a suggestion for anybody who's listening is like, how can I get out of this? Like, I can't relate to this, or like, I'm not sure if I like this. One of the things that I learned, in order to get a lot of credits of my college, I took a lot of film classes because I was an interdisciplinary major, so I could do what the fuck I wanted. So one of the things that I did was I took a lot of international or like non-Western film classes. So Bollywood. I also went to Turkish film classes and like human rights, which actually delved into a lot of documentaries or films or biographical films that were outside of the U.S. and made by people outside of the U.S. and outside of the West. And one of the things I learned is that once I started understanding the internal, like the cultural tropes, like things that were established in the culture itself, I started to enjoy the content more. So this might be also a suggestion that maybe one of the reasons why you might not feel comfortable listening or reading or watching certain stories is because you don't have the cultural context. You don't have the personal context from where that person is coming from. I think it's a suggestion, take it or leave it. But it's something that I've noticed helps when trying to deal with, like, I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know where this is starting from, or what perspective this is encompassing. Because art, especially if an artist from Turkey has a very different cultural context and is going to tell very different stories in a very different way because of their own cultural context. So I think it's again another way to challenge yourself, another way to be more open, actually have better active listening skills.
I'd love to hear what Anthony thinks on all of this, and then could I ask a question of just general, because I believe everyone who's currently here, first-time creators, as far as audio drama goes, probably not recording on a top mic. Mostly rolling solo. After rap, I would love to just have everybody kind of talk about, like, because I think that's another thing too for the community hammers. Even if I have this friend that I made who from like the bayou of Louisiana while I was hiking. Who, if he had been born in a city, would be the most liberal poet, whatever you say, right? This is a guy who's in a town of illiteracy, and he would go to the one open mic night they had on Thursday nights at the local bar once a month and read poetry. And on the hike, people were constantly putting him down because he appeared to be coming from a place of ignorance. But I'm going, look at this person's perspective. This person would be way more radically like left than you are had they been born here, because this is a person in a place of illiteracy in football who's reading on poetry nights. Even the words we've been using, and I really appreciate how Michelle has taken, said heterosexual, all of that. That suggests that we have the internet. We're around people who want to talk to us enough to explain these terms. Right? These aren't things they taught us in grade school. That all shows a position of privilege within understanding, where you're at and all of that. and probably some college education in there, right? I dropped out of school, but I still have that experience. So I want to definitely hammer in like everything Michelle said with that on just like, what resources do you have? Where are you coming from? But also being, and feel free to throw this out the window because I'm coming from like a place of perceived privilege. But also because I'm coming from that place and have exited, like not exited that, and I still have it, but like I don't.
You've navigated kind of outside of it.
I see how other people could do that. And which is why I put a lot of effort into it, because I'm comfortable with it, right? I'm not putting up with more bullshit that I've already dealt with my whole life. For a lot of people, they're like, I don't want to deal with this because I just got to a place where I can kind of be me. But for someone like me, it's like I go out and seek that because it's like, who would come over to this and who would be a great voice in this? But yeah, is being understanding of what people's, education levels, social levels, where were you growing up? Because I don't think they should necessarily be excluded at all. You should have a chance to, but also like when it comes to like, I see you're on a Blue Yeti, which is, it's a beautiful thing. I have like, I'm in a house of musicians. This is like a top recording mic that I don't use because it's too nice for the show. I don't use for audio drama because it sounds too good. I'll use it for voice.
First world problems.
Exactly. Right. And here's the thing is I am like in a house of 7 people in Inglewood, which in Los Angeles it's getting gentrified, but it's not the richest. But even then I have access to like these things because I'm in LA, right? I can go on Craigslist and find people dropping these $400 mics off for $100. But yeah.
All right.
I talk too much. But I'd love to hear people kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So, my head is sort of swirling with tons of different thoughts here. For me, creating was just something that I had to do to deal with my anxiety, right? And like I had done it for a really, really long time, and I was just doing it for me and deleting it, right? Like and that was it. And I always look at this and it as something that like whether I'm lucky enough to have people who care or I'm not, I'm still going to do it, right? So I look at it as just like this thing that I'm going to do regardless. And that's my personal experience with it. It's sort of like how I sort out my brain, if that makes any sense. And
so much sense.
And so, when I started with 2298, right? Like it was like I probably should get a good mic, right? Because like no, I don't know anyone to act this, right? Like I wanted 24 to be a girl. But then I was like, I can't write from that perspective. Like, you know what I mean? Like and to what Michelle was saying before, it's funny because I'm always assuming I can do something better. Like perpetually. I even have like one of my tattoos is all I know is I know nothing. Right. Like, cause I want it. I constantly feel that reminder of just like, I can do so much better. We can do better. Right. Like, and I just feel like that's a perpetual thought for me. So like if I was writing a show and she like DM'd me and was like, the girls you're writing in the show are like I would take that immediately and apply it. I just would. I would just trust it and apply it, and I'd be appreciative. And like, and that mindset, I don't know. I don't know that all of us don't really have that. I feel like and maybe that's just me being optimistic in the scenario, but like everyone I've ever reached out to, if they've given me constructive feedback or I've given them constructive feedback, it's always been met just so graciously, right? Like, and I don't know if that's how we are, like in terms of like personality types that the community attracts. I don't know what it is, but it's a beautiful thing. Like even, one time I got like, cause I speaking of, looking at things in the community, I always check like what my reviews are and like what my scores are and stuff like that. So I can judge myself even more. But yeah. So, one time I got a lower review, on a newsletter, and I actually messaged that person, and I was like, why? Out of curiosity, right? Like I was just curious. And they told me why, and I applied it to the next set of episodes. I thought they came out better. And I was just really happy, and I always encourage people to do that. And so that's why, to me, this community is so incredible, even with all its flaws, is that we aim to get better, right? Like you'll never achieve best, but we are striving for better, which is incredible. We help each other in a way that is most of the time selfless. And I think what's funny is, because most of us, I think we said in the beginning, like a lot of us are creator fans. I don't know a creator that's not a fan. And if you are, you're probably not going to admit it. I don't know how you could be a good creator without being a fan. I don't know how you can.
I don't think you'd get very far in the Twitter community.
No, certainly.
Yeah.
One of the first things I ever did was DM Mac Rogers and sent him my trailer, the draft for the trailer for 2298. And I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And I sent it to probably 10 different creators. And I tell a lot of new people this all the time, which is, you may send your stuff to a wide net. You're going to get one or two people who are going to see it, either not because the others, there's something disparaging to say about them. It's time, it's whatever else. But like, if you cast a wide net to people you admire, people will respond. And I remember he was like, you know what, you should start it a little more dramatically. Maybe just cut that beginning and start with, I'm still not sure I should be doing this. And like that to me made the trailer like so much better. And without that feedback, without reaching out, I don't know that I would have felt that encouragement, right? Like somebody with a show of a certain stature or a perceived stature responded, even in a small way. And so I think a lot of it is just putting aside whatever you feel might be a hang up or might get in your way, and literally just decide that you're going to reach out to these people, and the people who do respond to you now are going to become part of your family, and like just sort of trust us when we say that. And it's funny because I don't know if I would have, but that's what I say to people who are sort of like me, on the fence and nervous.
Yeah, one of the things that again, bringing back to this concept of community, one of the things that I'm still struggling with is this idea that if I hit a point that I'm like by myself, I can't figure something out, or I'm like, I'm trying to mull something over, or I don't know exactly where to go. Community is one of those resources that you can bounce off of and that you can get help from. I think one of the things, especially as people who are creators, or especially as indie podcasters of all stripes, we're often doing this alone, or we're doing this in very, very small groups. So being able to at least have some level support system. And I think this is incumbent upon us as creators who are already in this community to reinforce that buffer of people who are like, I am struggling with this. I'm struggling to create a trailer because I'm exhausted. Having people who can tell you it's okay, take a deep breath. I have the capacity, or even something like, and I think this is always important, make sure that the people you do ask are, you first ask them, if you have the capacity to answer this or to work on this, is really important, because being able or asking for critique for something, but really reinforcing this idea. I think it's maybe us people who are comfortable to do so, saying, hey, I sometimes have the capacity to give free advice, and I know I do. There are certain points where I don't, or I have to hold off for a little bit. Being honest and transparent. And I think somebody was talking recently about, making sure that we're transparent in the process of our processes, our writing processes, our editing processes, our casting, our inviting people for guests on and interviews, that those things are very important so that people who are trying to learn can at least at some point you say like, hey, and if you want more information, I have the capacity to do this type of thing or to comment on in this kind of way. Because I think it is important as a community to build that level of support system, that level of buffer for people who are struggling at some point or just need validation that like, yeah, you're exactly where you need to be. You're fine. You just keep going. We're here for you. We're still rooting for you. Like that's really important to create a healthy community too, is creating spaces like, hey, you are able to lean on us. You can lean on us a little bit more. It's okay. That's what's really important for me, at least, when it comes to building community. So I also want to get forward. I know we are running 2 hours. This is also a learning process for everybody who's still on. We still, like, you're great. You're awesome. Thank you for staying for us almost 2 hours. But this is also something for us to consider that, hey, some of these podcast panels might run 2 hours or longer or less, depending on what goes on. So any of you guys who are watching who want to be on a panel or planning to be on a panel, or like Chad is going to moderate a panel, this is also a learning process of community, right?
I'm going to watch this back and take notes.
Excellent.
For sure.
Awesome. Cool. So I know one of the things that I wanted to, I do want to note that I definitely want more conversations around red flags. One of the things that I brought up before are, people who, well, I mean, very obviously denigrate, but especially people who lash out at people who are clearly of a different status than they are. People who are very frequently like go after other people, even if it's construct or what they think of as is actually there's some valid conversations involved. Attitudes that make it so that it's more confrontational, especially if it's someone who's less privileged than the other person is. Like those types of patterns and red flags. I think I before we move on to the kind of looking forward, I do want to bring up making sure that we're protecting ourselves and we're telling other people these are also other tools to protect yourself from silos, from casting calls, from people who like the parasocial relationships where fans might feel entitled to your time or your energy, like those types of things to constantly bring up and be aware of and note. I just wanted to say that before we move forward. So if anybody else has any more questions, I do want to go into like, what do you see in the future of podcasting? Like the monetization, podcast networks, trying to balance weaknesses with strengths and building a solid foundation. And also eventually I'm going to wrap up by asking, where do you think this panel or other types of community building exercises like campaigns to get better directories for podcasts, mentorship programs, etc., and what people want to get out of the project? So those are the questions that I still want to hear your guys' thoughts on before we finish. Okay.
Aces.
Awesome. All right. So Michelle. I'm gonna ask Michelle. Can you talk a little bit about what you see in the future of podcasting and future of the podcasting community?
Gosh, it's so open-ended. I think that generally, despite my reservations, I think that generally we as specifically like the indie audio drama community, podcasting as a whole, like if we're talking about the whole overarching industry, I have a lot of reservations about. I still feel like podcasting, the whole industry is pretty much overwhelmingly like white, like people coming from a lot of positions of privilege, like white, cisgender, heterosexual men, doing politics podcasts where they have to talk to people on both sides of an issue, even if one of those people is a literal Nazi. Like that's kind of like that sentence, as cynical as that is, sort of encapsulates how I feel about like the whole like podcastosphere. I think that the indie audio drama sphere is like in general on the right path, despite my reservations. I think that we do need to like figure out as a community, like how to have these conversations without straying into like entitlement or fan entitlement or toxic call out behavior. Because that like call out culture can absolutely get super toxic and lead to burnout and like real damage to people. And I think that we like need to navigate those. And I don't necessarily have like action steps for that, but I think that that's like pretty much the biggest challenge I see right now is like navigating, keeping like this tight knit community feeling without letting it get insular or turning into like a microcosm of the larger culture, but like slightly more rainbow tinted. That's like what I would like to avoid. And I think that like I have faith in the people that I know, and I don't know, it gets really complicated to talk about because there's like all of us, I would say, are within like the same like microcosm of indie podcasting, but then there's like larger indie audio drama podcasting, but then there's like the larger audio drama community. There are podcasts that I've never listened to who like get huge platforms, and then go on to say some of the denigrating things that we've been talking about. So it's just like sort of like spheres on spheres on spheres. But I think that in general, like that's what we need to watch out for. And I think that we're at least talking about it, which is like a really good first step. And overall, I still feel like positively about the community. I just have reservations.
Yeah, and those are really important reservations to bring up. And thank you. Honestly, thank you, because giving voice and calling out the shadows, call out to my own show. Naming what are the things that are darker, things we don't want to, that are uncomfortable to think about, like monetization, like, you know, and some of the feelings about who's getting monetized, people who like, you know, podcast networks, how those networks are being formed and how they're operating, silos of, again, the issues around, you know, the types of people you bring on to your show, whether they're your friends or they're actually people that you reach outside of the community, or they're people from certain areas of privilege. I think all of those are really important to at least be aware of and bring up and know those red flags, and in order for us to have a healthy, growing, sustainable community. And I feel those conversations are very deep, and we do not have time for that. But we will. I think that is really important that we, when we do a monetization panel, to maybe bring up, hey, these are some of the feelings that might come up around monetization, and they're valid. But you know, there might be other ways to look at the situation depending on where you are. But yeah, okay. So going to you other guys, what your thoughts are about the future of the community, things that you're kind of noticing are starting to rise up that will have some sort of either positive, negative, neutral impacts, but are just things that are happening as our community grows and things happen in podcasting.
I have a problem thinking about the future without being cynical about it, apparently. And so I'll tell you what I hope is the future, right? Because I don't like to speculate, but I'll tell you what my hope is, that we get to a point where these creators and these shows that reach the level that they want to reach, which is whatever goal you set for yourself, right? Like, is it to have a close-knit community that you talk to and feel engaged with? Is it a number of downloads? Is it a rating score? Is it, you know, a certain number per month on your Patreon? Like, I'm not here to judge goals, and I will never judge goals or anything like that. But I feel like what I hope happens is when shows attain those goals, whatever they've set for themselves, that they then in turn sort of take that knowledge and opportunity and use that to platform other voices, other shows, other groups, and hopefully have the humility to step back and say, I've told my story, I've attained a goal. I'm not going to not tell another story again, right? I'm not putting myself on the back burner, but I've attained a goal, and now I should pay that back forward before I start another journey of my own. And so that's what I hope happens.
What do you think? What are you worried about? I do want to hear what you're worried about.
The network. I'm always worried about the network.
So the network. So just to be clear, Anthony has a podcast called 2298, and the villain is something called the network. So
are they the villain though?
Are they? Come on.
That's the thing. The phrasing, the network, comes from this idea of like, we'll strategize so well to be a community that we have strategized ourselves out of organic connection and humanity. And that's why sometimes, like, when I talk strategy and I talk, like, you know, prospecting out things I feel disgusting. And it's because I fear that I'm standing on that slippery slope, right? And I feel like I'll fall. And so what I would fear happening is that somebody makes a show that becomes a TV show and then is like, well, I'll still make audio drama, and I'll create a collective that also makes audio drama, and I'll help them make shows, but they'll all sort of be similar shows to mine, or they'll all be the same type of voices or the same type of experiences or the same even genre, you know, like, and so I hope that diversity wins. You know what I mean? That's all. I think it has a good chance. I think in our community, it has a stronger and tougher ability to fight than maybe in like TV, you know, where it's already like metastasized, you know, to be this thing, this monolith. And so that's what I fear, is that we add to the monolith, right? Like there's already, you can feel the tendrils wrapping around the community a little bit. And that's why, you know, I also appreciate this panel, you know, Michelle and everyone who's brought up like that we need to be guarded, right? Like we can be admittedly happy and excited, but there is an enemy at the gates always, right? Like, and that I think is important to keep in mind. And they are the network, you know, that is who they are. And that's why even, I think there's a benefit, and this sort of touches on the gatekeeping. I think there's a benefit to certain communities and networks and things like that. You know, I've been a part of one, in the past. And so I understand the benefits and the camaraderie and everything awesome that comes along with it. But to me, it's also, again, a very short distance away from that monolithic network only recommending ourselves to the same group of people. And that's what I hope to avoid in terms of in the future of audio drama and stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. That's actually the exact type of thing that I want to other people to hear. Because I think that really does that. I mean, like, I'm sure everybody now is like thinking, oh, yeah, I can kind of see the tendrils now. I can see how that can spiral into an extreme or into something that creates a static community. And again, one of the things that I really want what I want out of this panel is the fact that it is rotating, that we want more people. I don't want to be on a panel for, I don't know, maybe even like a year, right? Mm-hmm. I'm totally okay with other people and training. If that means that I have to train other people to some capacity, like I did a video of like for the moderators of this panel or potential moderators on how to set this up. I want like people to only be doing this like maybe once a year, because there's so many people that are in this community. There's so many voices that can be heard. And I think that is one of those defenses against creating a network that is unhealthy.
And just to make one last thing, and I'll shut up real fast. Is that like, I don't want it to seem like I'm saying that creators should make a show, have it become successful, and then stop. You know, that's certainly not what and it's like, you don't have to even stop creating while you're helping others and while you're lifting other people up. Like, you can still write and just store those and stock those, and then you have stories for later, which as somebody who was writing episodes the week they were supposed to come out, is a great thing to have happen, is that you have this backlog of awesome created stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to say that real fast. I don't want to insinuate like that you make a show and then you have to stop and silence your voice to lift up others. You can, it's about knowing when to amplify and when to store something away.
Yeah. I think that it's storing those seeds, right? It's like any type of, agriculture. You store some of the seeds so you have some for the next harvest.
Right.
And I think that's an important point to make. And in order to keep a healthy community, there are so many different roles. Even just for this podcast panel, like to get it set up, we had so many people were not multitasking. Other people were taking on different tasks based on their capacity. And I think as a community, we need to kind of lean on each other's different strengths, because if diversity really is going to win out, we're going to have so many different strengths of people who are able to come on in their own capacity, and it covers wide ground, and not shutting the door on any particular person's weakness either. Yeah.
Cool.
Chad, your floor now.
We're talking about the future?
Yes.
Okay. What I would like to see is I want everybody to be able to do this however they want. And I want the community to be large enough where they can find other people who want to do it that way as well. We mentioned networks. I don't want anybody, and this is something like, for example, we've got Fate Crafters rep here. I've never gotten the vibe from Fate Crafters that Fate Crafters is like, don't make other networks. Anytime people are like, hey, cool, Fate Crafters network, they're like, yeah, guess what? You too can make a little icon and a name and start a network with other people that you believe in. So my hope, what I would like is for there to be a variety of styles of podcasting. We've already seen a variety of styles of how we handle, for example, social media creation. I think we're all flying by the seat of our pants to some extent, and probably hoping not to do that in our second seasons as much, even though we will. Let's be real. But to have a variety of examples. So for people who want to network up, they're like, okay, these are some examples of networks. Maybe I want to join one. Maybe I want to create one. These are people who have, Eli talked about collectives. There might be people who are like, look, I don't have time for community, or I don't want to participate, when they're speaking honestly, but they're like, I would like to work kind of with my own little theater house, my collective. Yeah. I'd like those people to be able to do that. I'd love people who want to go full solo to be able to go solo. And ideally, I want more and more resources. I've been considering going into debt to get a camera so that we can do some video essays just on like, here's how to do this because at the closing ceremony of PodCon, one of the Night Vale brothers stepped up and was like, hey, and in the nutshell said, we started this show on using GarageBand and a $50 mic, and then the $50 mic broke, and now we do it on a Blue Yeti USB mic using GarageBand. Show's huge, right? I think good ideas went out. Michelle was talking about, accessibility of what does your podcast sound like when you have a team and expertise and education versus when you don't. But for me, good writing and good vision wins out every time. Unless my only weakness is mouth noises. And look, if you've got good vision and you have a lot of mouth noises, I found a speaker that I can listen to your show on that edits a lot of them out. And I will listen to your show. It might take me a little longer, but I am selfishly here for stories. Good stories that I've never heard before. I am a glutton for stories. And audio drama spoiled me on TV because I'm like, these are being told by the same people. Like it's being told by the same bubble. And audio and constantly get different new stories. I want that to be a thing. I want there to be too many podcasts to listen to. Going into gatekeeping, a notorious that was meant kind of as a joke audio drama production podcast thread that got out was a guy going, it was a very gatekeeper post. There's too many stories. You shouldn't make a podcast unless it's this good. You shouldn't make a podcast unless you could do that. everyone dogpiled it. And I'm the opposite. I want there to be too many shows to listen to. I want there to be shows on all levels. I want every type of story to be told. That's kind of what my dream for the community is, for it to just continue to grow and be diverse. I think with the audience, the general audience that we deal with, is a lot of them, the vocal ones, are hungry for any kind of new experience or diversity that they haven't heard before. And so I think anytime somebody's providing something that shares that experience, people are going to be receptive to it. And I know that, or I think this because I've seen a lot of, people in their 40s and 50s be like, well, I'm not part of the blah, 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 and I don't have this, so I'm not going to get all of my likes on my media platform. I was like, your show's great too. Everybody you could all make great shows, but that's what people are hungry for. That's what people are hungry for. What I don't want to see happen, and I think done right, these various things can help, is I want everything to be productive and resource oriented. I mentioned before, I don't want to see clicks, like clicks being like the primary thing, to the point where it does seem like a fortress of these creators that you can't get into and you can't touch. I don't want to see us lose the sight that for most, I think probably audience members, they're looking for good entertainment in different varieties, whether it's something to cry to or to laugh to or to eat popcorn to. That's what they're after. 2 cakes for them is better than 1 cake, even if 1 cake is beautiful and 1 cake is like a lump. That we spend so much time looking on the inside that it becomes destructive to ourselves. Because I think we've seen that with, people have mentioned, I have no experience with Tumblr, but I often hear Tumblr, they're like, I liked Tumblr 10 years ago, and now it's just, you can't get by there without having people jump on you for anything. Once again, I don't have experience with that, but I don't want to see that happen. Like, I would love to see it just focus on creativity and support and stuff. But yeah, what I want and I think we're going to get that, right? I think we're definitely going to get people who swing in with a bunch of entitlement, like, oh, audio drama, this is how it should be done. I'm trying to make a TV show. We're going to get those people. And you know what? That's fine, because we're not necessarily going to share an audience, and maybe their show's great. But as long as we emphasize that whole like $50 mic, no experience, and we have some resources out there so people who can get $50 together in a mic and have no experience can make things, that there's always room for them, right? I don't think it's a zero-sum game.
Yes.
I don't
absolutely.
think iTunes has a limit on how many podcasts it's going to allow.
Hopefully, unless the network takes over.
Unless the network, then they're going to select us all. I mean, aren't we all in the network right now? Since
yes.
It's all just thought experiments.
Yes, Anthony, you're going to have to be the canary in the coal mine for that.
These are all hints of why you should listen to 2298. There's a supercut. It's like 2.5 hours long.
I will not comment on any of the actions of my employer.
Okay.
But I do love that you say that, because like, I think also, and this is a personal want, and it may be, again, just coming from where like my mindset is, I want to burn them all down, right? Yeah. Like I don't want the majority of audio dramas to be on platforms leash. Like, I was trying to think of a better way to say that, but that's just how I feel about it. Like, I don't, and I know some of that comes from, just like, can you afford monthly hosting for a website, right? Like it comes down to things that I could never judge or project onto other people. But like, that would be a goal for me, is that like all of us own and have complete power and authority and agency over our creations. That's like another thing. So I'm glad you said that, because like tangentially, that's where my brain goes in terms of just like, how do we own this, right? How do we, like was alluded to, like, how do we gatekeep this in a positive, constructive, open way, where the gates are open, but we're also, we're aware of what's going on and what is happening, and making sure that, what we're doing is ours and representative of us in a way that we want. And sometimes I worry that, even the most podcast audio drama friendly of hosting platforms, they go down one day, they go bankrupt. Like the thought of losing these shows like is crushing to me. So like I also would want to see us take control. Maybe burn it down's a little much.
I love it.
I think that's
24 had it rough, okay?
I think that's a really good point too, is, like I said before, like on the one hand, yes, we need to have conversations about what it is to have a healthy community in a way that is like, how we accept people, how we keep things open. But at the same time, sometimes we need to like put our foot down. Like that is, I think that is important. And there's certain people that should be aware of like where they can do that. I've seen wonderful things when a couple of people, like I know a couple of times people have been dogpiled on who are of minority communities, and ask was sent out like, hey, I don't have the emotional capacity to like fight this toxicity. Can I get some help? And as soon as a white cis male steps in, the conversation stops, or the attack stops often. Yeah. So I think knowing that there is a place for us to gatekeep, to actually close the gates, or at least protect people. That's also a really important part of community, is how do we protect people who are vulnerable, and making sure we're aware of threats, of actual like real threats. And I think being that's one way that we can hold our community accountable, is like, hey, when something toxic is happening, people need to step up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say before I forgot. So I'm on Twitter @_shellshock, which I am mentioning because I tweeted about this panel, and underneath that I will put a link. I was trying to think of like how to collate. I don't know if that's the right word. How to collect these Twitter threads. Because there was the one that I referenced earlier, and then I know Aaron Keon, who does Love and Luck, talked about the cakes metaphor that Chad talked about. So I'll put that, and then Amanda McLaughlin of Join the Party in Spirits also did a thread, or maybe a couple of tweets on like something similar to what Anthony was talking about, where like as a community, if we're like actively trying to build a community, part of our responsibility is that once we get once we get resources, whether that's like a platform or I can't think of the word I want, but like community collateral, then part of the thing you can do is turn around and use it to immediately build other people up. And Amanda has talked about that before. So I will like put all of that on a Twitter thread in case anybody wants to read all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm all about that. I'm quietly producing 2 shows for people with very different experiences than me. And then as far as casting goes, and this is me saying this is what I'm doing, and I was doing this anyways, and I think enough people are doing it. But when it comes to people have gone, I think it's really cool, and it's really helped new creators, people who are new to the scene, when they've cast people with some kind of voice and some kind of platform. I think it's really helped their shows take off and get some visibility. For established shows, because I could probably, for the second season of my show, get a lot of the people that actors, I could be like, hey, do you want to be in this show? And they would probably say yes. But my general goal is I'm like, I don't want, and this is nothing against them. I love them. I'll make a project for everybody else. But I want people to, I don't want to use actors that people know from other shows and get them excited about that. I want people to be excited about the actors that I bring onto my show because it's on my show. And that grows, right? And then maybe other people will go, hey, I really like that actor. And then it'll keep being a swirly circle.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to start because I'm going to do another time check. Are you guys all okay for another 10 minutes as we end?
For sure.
10 minutes.
Yeah, I got 10.
Okay, great. Thank you guys again for dealing with the first baby steps of this panel. One of the things that I do want to I want to get a closing statement from each of you is, what are some of the things? Either what are the core things you want from people to get from this panel, or what are some of the kind of expansion points that you think would be really helpful for the community? This is something like a mentorship program, better directories for podcasts, like more meetups, things like that. Like, what are some of the other types of things that you'd be interested in seeing or doing? For example, I met up with the Women of Color podcast meetup here in DC. There was one person who's like, I'm thinking of writing a sci-fi fiction podcast. And I'm like, talk to me. And so now I met up with her again. And I'm going to hold her accountable to write. So essentially I'm going to be like a de facto mentor to help her get her show off the ground. And in a way and in a capacity that I'm able to. Cause I'm really, really good at being the boot camp instructor for artists and just telling sit your ass down in front. Whether I can do that for myself is a different story. But that kind of thing, what are some of the things that you want to see maybe more people doing or organizing? Or what things that you want people to get from this panel specifically, or how you want this panel to expand?
I think everything comes down to interaction, right? And so the things I would like to see done more are ways to reach those who may have difficulty in interacting in certain ways. So I've never heard of it. It just popped into my brain, like a digital con or something like that, where it's like a bunch of Google Hangout rooms where it's like for this weekend, because people can't all travel and buy plane tickets and hotels and all this stuff. You have a convention where you're talking to people who are doing something and it's just through Hangouts like this. Or people have book clubs. Why don't they have audio drama clubs, right? I feel like the interaction, the conversation, it creates more fans of the genre, which helps the creators, and it creates more creators, which helps the genre. And I feel like it's just the more interaction that can be encouraged, and the more it can be sort of manipulated so that it works for everyone, right? Because like I was saying, I know there are tons of people who have incredible voices, incredible stories waiting to be told, who either don't know about the medium, right? Can't afford to go to an event to learn about it. You know what I mean? Even the privilege to create the story owning a computer.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know how you can create audio drama without a computer. So that's a privilege in and of itself to have a computer. And so I have, some computers. I take them to places where I know that there might be people who have homes, but they're also struggling in other ways financially. And you just hand them the devices that you were otherwise going to throw away. Why not? Right? That person could go ahead and do something with that. That is wonderful. And so, I think just the more we can interact with each other and take into account each other's circumstances and privileges, I think we'll be fine. As long as we do that, as long as we're talking, as long as we're interacting, and as long as we're, humbling ourselves to each other's experience, I think we'll be okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, next one. Who wants to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in. Closing statements. What I'd like people, or what I hope people got out of this panel is that it's accessible. You can make audio drama on a $50 mic. There's going to be people who want to hear it. No, and if I could do a bit of advice, I would say tell it in your voice. Because if you make a show and someone in a different voice, you're like, oh, I think people really like horror, so I'm going to write horror in this specific way. You'll get an audience and you'll have people who really like it. But if you do it very much specific to you, you'll also get an audience and people are going to like it. You're not going to be able to stop people from liking your show. But I hope people have seen that it's accessible. Most people on this panel have said, hey, send me a message. So take advantage of that, and I have the best feelings about the audio drama community as a whole. It's the best creative community. I've been a part of, and I've been a part of a lot of creative communities. You know, it's a good spot. And I think at its heart, it comes down to just a lot of really good, unique shows, content, because we're capitalists, like shows that can resonate with a variety of people and help them get through their day. And as you know, Michelle mentioned before, sometimes help keep you on earth, because that's definitely, you know, PodCon. I was horrifically depressed during PodCon, and that gave me a whole like, okay, I'm going to be at the next PodCon. This is how do I live my life in a way where I am around to be at the next PodCon. And so, yeah, I want to say that. And also my other takeaways, never get complacent. There's always so much to do. If you need to pat yourself on the back, pat yourself on the back. But we've got, so, I mean, I think people look at us and this is the most diverse medium I've seen, but there's still so much room. There's still so much room. And I hope we all recognize that. And those who are in a position, you know, I love what Anthony said. And I think this is the sentiment of a lot of people, is because that was my plan, right? Is to make a show where I had enough of a platform and voice that then I could find other creators who wanted to do stuff and give them my resources. Just because that's how I want to do it. Everybody's got a different thing. And I think I can, you know, I've pretty much sold my soul to the audio drama world. I have really nice equipment at this point. I don't make much money at all. It's just something I prioritize, and I don't have kids. Or, you know, it's something I prioritize. So you can get nice, I mean, I'm in a low income area. I'm with a bunch of artists who don't have a lot of money. We've got nice stuff, but that's just because we spent our money on that. And even that you don't need to do. You can do it with a $50 mic.
Or an iPhone.
Or an iPhone, or you can write. A lot of people are just writers and they put out casting calls. Mm-hmm. And my big takeaway from this, and this will be my last thing, was just barely touched on, but having clearly communicated casting calls. Don't say this is open to everybody if you're not really intending on accepting everybody. I think casting calls are new to a lot of people because most people are like first-time creators coming in. But that's something that could be worked on. If we do acknowledge and work on that, it could be to the point where the creator reflects, oh, this is a tendency that I am going to fall into because I, you know, say for us, like we're Americans. We were brought up during this period of time, which means this is ingrained in here somewhere to different degrees. And this is how statistically I will respond to this situation. So let me make sure I'm putting out a casting call that's honest, that reflects that doesn't cause people to have bad experiences. You know, even if they don't get cast in your production, people know that they had a good crack at it. You know, they had a fair shot at it. Those are my words.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, Michelle. Yeah.
I agree with what both Chad and Anthony said. I would like to see, that's something that I've been thinking on too, is like ways that we can work on redistributing resources like within the community and getting them to people. I would love to see, and I don't know the logistics of this, and like at this specific moment in time, I don't even have the spare money to like contribute to something like this. But like I would love to see some kind of like PodCon scholarship fund, like even just organized within the audio drama community, or like an equipment fund, or, you know, something that I've been thinking about is like, when I'm recording with just me, I have like a mic setup that I sometimes use, but like I also have like, for my USB mic is like a Blue Snowball, and I'm like, okay, eventually I'm going to get a Yeti. And when I do that, like, how do I find someone who doesn't have like even the $60 for a Snowball and like give this to them so that they can make something? So I would love to see like more conversations about that. And also what Chad said about Chad and Eli both said about the complacency. Both like not thinking that because you checked one diversity checkbox, like whether you're part of the group or not thinking that because you checked one diversity checkbox that like you're completely infallible. And even if you have multiple intersecting oppressions, like still being open to critique and criticism. I had something else and I forgot it. But I think that that's basically, and as far as what people got out of the panel, like what people would get out of the panel, I would love to say like everyone here, like, or I mean, I think everybody has said like that they're open to messages. I'm absolutely open to messages. I'm on Twitter. There's also like there's a website link on Twitter. There's my email on like all email and contact form on all of my websites. If you want me to read something or give you feedback or brainstorm, or like, I would really like to set up some kind of like writing community for like writing days or writing sprints, because that really helps me as someone who has issues focusing, like having other people and being like, okay, we're all going to write for like this amount of time. Is like, and then being able to like talk at the end is super, super helpful for me. So I've thought about trying to organize like something like that. Yeah. It's like, it really helps me. And yeah, I think I'd just like to see it. Like, I just would like people to know that like the communities are there. One of my big concerns is that, you know, and we've talked about this at length in like the podcast problems Discord. And I think that part of that was the impetus for like this project, is that like people, like my big concern is that a lot of the really positive parts of the audio drama community that I interact with are basically behind sort of a closed wall. They're gated communities. So they're in like those small Discord channels or Slacks, and those are beautiful. And if you want to get into those, like seriously, DM me or email me, I'll get you the link, or like the links are public, like you can get in those. But if you're, my fear is people seeing some of the stuff on Twitter that we've been talking about, where people, you know, are like, oh, nobody needs another one voice podcast. Like that's done. I declare that done. Or we don't need another post-apocalyptic podcast. Like no matter who's writing it, like this is done. This genre is done. This style is done. I hate it and it's boring and overdone. Let's move on. Framing devices are always bad. Like that kind of conversation. I'm worried about people seeing that kind of conversation and automatically gatekeeping themselves out of audio drama because like that's all they're seeing. So like if that is all you've seen and you stumbled across this because of like our SEO work or whatever, like there's more to the community, and it's a lot better than like pretentious douchebags who want to tell you what you can and can't do because they think that they're the arbiters of something good, because they're not, and they're wrong.
So wrong.
So you should come join us in like the good places. It's a lot better.
That's not the good place. Because the good place is the bad place.
Yeah.
Sorry. I love that show. Okay. Thank you guys so much. We've definitely gone over time. One last thing I want from you guys. Can you please say where people can find you on the internet if they wanted to, and if you want them to?
I'm on Twitter at, it's _shellshock, but it's shell like Michelle. So it's _CHELLESHOCK. And there are links to, there's a pinned tweet with links to all of my projects. Like I said, like all of my sites have my email or a contact form or both. So if you want to get in touch with me, like that's the best way to sort of like get a handle on all of my projects, because there's a lot.
Awesome. Next.
2298 Pod, Magic King Pod, Limbo Pod, all Twitter. You can go to allhaildom.com because it rhymes like she does. Yeah, so that's pretty much where you can find me. Discord, you can message me there too. I think I'm just number 24 on there, so you can just find me in any of those rooms. I am reclusive, as I've sort of alluded to, but what I will always do is reply. Like I've never not replied to a message, and so that's the thing. Like it may take me a while sometimes to get to it, but I will definitely get to it. I'd also say to listen to Girl in Space, because like I do stuff with Sarah too for that show. So if you're not listening to that, you probably should be. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Chad.
Yeah, Twitter is @StationBluePod. Website is stationbluepodcast.com. Email is stationbluepodcast@gmail.com. And then Station Blue as a show is just in whatever podcatcher. First season's almost done.
Woo!
9th episode's coming out this week, and then it's the finale. And also you can find me if you're looking for voice. 1994 podcast is coming up. Really good road trip 90s. It's hilarious. Yeah, look for that. And there's a lot of creator, if we're talking about you want a show that's just all creators like packed in a thing having fun. That's going to be coming out pretty soon here. So look for me there. And yeah, also feel free to shoot me emails. I I have different mental states, and I respond to them either like that, or it'll take me like 5 days. But it depends. I'll respond to you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, guys. So again, I'm Lisette Alvarez. You can find me at Lisette Walking, and that's Lisette, walking, like you're walking, or at Kalila Stormfire, which is my podcast. You can also find me at lisettealvarez.com or kalilastormfire.com. I will try to make sure I put all of everybody's contact information that they've given into the show notes, or the it's not show notes. This isn't a podcast. The video notes. I'm new at YouTube.
This is a podcast.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I also want to tell all you guys who've been on this, and I'll also tell Eli. Look at the chat; it's adorable. I love all of you guys in the
wonderful.
chat. They've been very sweet. And I've also noticed that Ellie, aka at Showmark, has been live tweeting this, which is amazing.
Love you, Ellie. Ellie was my foot in the door. So
same hat.
I was gonna say shout out to anyone who's ever like reviewed or sent a newsletter or done anything to just like promote audio drama and podcasting, because like I mean those are for sure the real MVPs. And also 100%. I now have to go listen to that Nelly song, because like we all said like you can find me, and so in my head when in St. Louis rolling on dubs, you know, like I'm gonna have to listen to Country Grammar now thanks to y'all. So thank you.
You're not welcome.
I'll do one more plug. We're putting together the next panel, the next one of these. It is on imposter syndrome. I am hosting it. It should be good. We've got some really exciting creators on there. I don't know if they've been, if you're publicly announcing them or if we're waiting till closer. But
no, you're announced.
it's a good. I mean, look here. I know we've got.
That's a subject I love.
Imposter syndrome.
It's very near. It's very near and dear to my heart.
B. Highlands, Jeff Van Driesen, James Oliva, Sarah Sachet. Is that right? Sarah Sachet, and Bridge Green.
That'll be good.
All areas of the podcast world. It's going to be good stuff.
That'll be cool.
All right.
I will be tuning in for that.
Thank you guys so much. You've been awesome. I apologize again for running long. There's expectation versus reality meme is here. Insert here. But yeah, thank you guys so much. This was lovely. Thank you all for watching. And if you're watching after this is being done, thank you. And again, feel free to message us as we've asked gave expectations of what messaging us is like. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you around.
Yeah.
Bye.
I don't know how to end this. Okay, bye.
Bye.